Welcome to Around the World in 80 Murders. And we have a very nice panel here with us today. We have at the far end, Gary Renshaw. Okay. He started publishing short stories back in 2013 and then really got serious about his publishing. And his first novel, The Stable Vices Affairs, was published in 2014. And it was followed by The Prince and the Puppet Affair and the, how do you say that? In 2015. And
The Kalevala Affair was published this spring.
This spring, there you go. He's also extremely active both with WWC Prep and Planning and also with other aspects of the writing community here in Calgary. So welcome, Gary. And we have Sharon Wildwind, the Mystery Lady of Calgary, here with us, the Mystery Maven. And she writes and she edits and she does all those social media things that we have to do these days. And like many of us, she fights the gremlins of self-doubt. And she is very willing to help new authors, to help writers, and to help those of us who also struggle with the gremlins of self-doubt. So welcome, Sharon. Okay, and Ian is next. I think probably he's one of our invited guests this year, and we're delighted to have him.
Thank you.
Canadian mysteries are becoming more and more popular, I believe, from what I've seen. So he has, I noticed first of all that he has 7 grandchildren, but now he's just told me he's got 8. So he's one up on me. His 10th Eva Lee novel is written, and the 11th is right underway, and I think your 12th is also sort of worked on, is it not?
Partially.
Partially ready. And he was born in Wales.
Yes.
Grew up mainly in Canada. He worked as a journalist, he worked for the government, and he worked independently as a globe-trotting businessman, and
Yes,
he worked quite a lot of time in China and is very familiar with the Chinese culture. So therefore, his character, Ava Lee, is a gay Chinese-Canadian forensic accountant and martial arts expert. And she also has a talent for unraveling complex white-collar financial crimes. So that's the protagonist that he works with. And his, I have another note here. I know I do. His Ava Lee books are available in 9 countries, and all 9 of the books have been optioned for film, and the CBC is in the early stages of developing a series based around his character. And he says, I'm good for 14 books, because that's what his contract went to. So welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much.
And last but not least, our own Jayne Barnard, who writes award-winning fiction. She draws from history, mystery, and fantastical tales. Quite a mix. Her full-length mysteries have been shortlisted for both the Unhanged Author, which is Canadian, and the Debut Dagger, which is...
The UK's... Weren't you also shortlisted?
Yeah, for the UK, in the UK.
The UK.
Okay. And her current book is Maddie Hatter and the Deadly Diamond. It's a YA...
Steampunk.
Steampunk, really, yes. And it's a finalist in the Aurora, so we'll find out tonight how she's done with that, or tomorrow night at the banquet, rather. And it's also been listed in the book publishers in Alberta. She's up in the running for that one. And one other that she couldn't remember the name of, and I don't know either. It's another one. It's another one. It's a mystery. Thank you, Constantine. Okay, so welcome, Jayne. Where's my questions here? So what we're going to do here is we have 4 questions that there was some discussion with some of the panel members, and they've given me 4 questions that we're going to start with and have each of them answer, and then we will take questions from the floor. So we're going to start with, where in the world are your characters? Where have you set your fictional crime? And have you visited, how many of those places have you visited? And Constantine is going to stick in pins for, we'll see a representation. Okay, we'll go back this
Poor
way.
guy, what
We'll
a job.
start with you, Jayne. Let's see.
Oh, okay. Well, start
Yep.
with me.
We'll look the other way back.
Let's see. I have 25 years of short crime fiction to draw on here, so I may have a slight edge over a few people. But I'm going to stick with the big ones. So, what used to be East Germany. The Alps, the border between Switzerland and France.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah, I drove
Yeah.
somebody off the road in a storm
Oh, lovely.
and crashed their Mercedes down the mountainside and enjoyed every moment of it.
There's always a Mercedes.
And Greece, Constantine will like that one.
Yes. And if you've been to these places, put your hand up so we know you've been to one of them. Been to Greece? Oh, a lot of.
Actually, I was in an airship above the Parthenon. And it was a full moon.
I'll hover.
Yes, hover over the Parthenon. Okay. Also, of course, Cairo. That's where Maddie Hatter and the Deadly Diamond starts. Anybody been to Cairo?
Oh, we have.
Oh, yay, thank you.
We have one person that's been
Always
there.
good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, then Venice. Oh,
Ah.
Venice, wonderful. The third Maddie is going to be set entirely in Venice because I love it so much. Then London, England. Cornwall. Specifically Bodmin Moor. Anybody? Mm-hmm. Will's been there. Oh, there. Janice has been there. Okay. Land's End. Also in Cornwall, right off the end.
Again,
so
Janet.
that's pretty easy. New York.
A few more with that one.
Jacksonville, Mississippi. Okay, and then Washington, Seattle, and Bellingham. And now we're finally back to Canada.
And your 2 minutes is up. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Okay, so I'm going to go really, really fast through Canada then.
Yeah.
Okay, we have between Comox and Qualicum Beach, BC, Vancouver Island, Surrey, BC,
Oh, we got hands going up.
yeah, Lake Louise, Banff,
Everybody should have been there.
Calgary. I drowned somebody in the Bow River, but then they changed the weir and it wouldn't work anymore.
So everybody should have put their hand up because
Yeah.
you are in Calgary, are you
Right.
not? Yeah.
Okay, and then if you put one in each province across the country, you wouldn't be wrong.
Okay.
No, you don't need to do that. Unless you want to count them. If you want to count them, count them. Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Ian.
Okay, I'll do these countries first.
Okay.
Okay.
Denmark, Faroe Islands, great place to visit, by the way. Iceland, UK, Holland, in Asia, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore.
I think that gal in the back, Ian, that you were talking to has been just about everywhere.
She's amazing. The UK, of course.
Yeah.
Toronto, quite a few places in the U.S., and all over China. So China, Nanjing, Beijing, Wuhan, Kunming, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. You have several exotic places there. Miss Sharon.
When I lived in North Carolina, I wrote a book about that took place in Canada. And when I moved to Canada, I wrote a series of books that took place in North Carolina. In fact, I'm redoing one of the Canadian books right now, and it's a little disconcerting because it's November in the book, and I get up from my writing and I look outside the window and go, it's not snowing. It was snowing a minute ago. Anyway, all right. New Iberia, Louisiana, a place James Lee Burke writes about. I have family connections there. New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm working on a play right now that takes place in New Orleans. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Western North Carolina. Scotland. London. Vietnam. Thailand. And I think that just about covers it. Okay.
Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, just to be nice to Constantine for once in my life, I'm going to start with Calgary and move east. So Calgary, which is where the protagonist in my series lives, London, England. I had to say that because otherwise he'd have stuck it in Ontario. Okay, I'll go north to south then. Finland. Jonsu, in fact, if you can find it. Sweden. What's the... Uppsala, yes. Always forget the name of the city. Big cathedral there. Gdansk. We got Gdansk. Northern side of Poland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stick it in Poland.
Well, Poland all the way down to the bottom. So there you go. Czech Republic, Slovakia. Austria. You're wondering how I'm going east from there. South Korea. Might as well hit them on the way past. Marshall Islands. Just stick it somewhere in the Pacific. Yep.
Yeah.
And the Big Island, Hawaii. I'm good.
So do you think we're getting a good selection of pins on this map? Do you think our Around the World in 80 Murders is applicable here? Did we hit 80?
Oh, I don't think we hit 80. A challenge.
Not at this time.
I have.
You could add Nova
missed-
Scotia.
I have Australia.
He has Australia.
Okay, and put in Nova
Sydney.
Scotia, that's where mine are set.
Sydney, Australia.
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah, I
there's an
missed-
open market.
No, I missed
He's got one.
I missed Guyana and Trinidad.
Actually, I do have
Venezuela. Venezuela.
I have a standalone
Venezuela.
novel that takes place in partially in Brazil.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we got everybody covered.
It's true.
Anybody in Russia?
Amazon Us would be good.
Nobody's gone to Russia yet, it's open game. Are you
Yonsu
gonna count
is
them
only
for
a
us?
few
Are you gonna
kilometers
count
from
them?
Russia.
Sorry, you said Australia. Where was
Sydney.
Of course.
Australia? Okay, sorry, you said...
Nova Scotia.
Yeah,
We got
were
that,
just-
yeah, you got that one.
Nothing-
Okay,
Nothing in Africa.
okay, do you think we have 80 though? Has anybody been counting? Not 80, not anywhere near it. Okay, well, we'll have to up our game for another year. There you go. What'd she say?
Poetic license.
Poetic license, yes, exactly. Okay, so the next question that we have is why do you think readers are attracted to books in foreign places, distant locales, different cultures? And on the flip side, what's the appeal for you, the author, to write in that area? And we'll go with Ian and then Gary, and then we'll come back to Sharon and Jayne. So Ian, take it off.
And Georgia. Georgia. Sorry.
On your mind?
The state or the country?
Oh, the country.
Country.
Country, fine.
Oh, the country.
I'm not completely sure why people do like reading about foreign places. I know I'm a great reader of travel books and travel memoirs. I find them, but they have to be highly entertaining. I don't like travelogues, but I like a Norman Lewis book where he's in a place and he's giving you a feel for the place and the flavor of the place, but it's always interwoven with human interaction, human story, and so that's what I really enjoy. It's like, a fish being out of water, like O'Hanlon about going into the jungle in Borneo. I don't know if you've read that book, Redmond O'Hanlon, but I mean he's just completely out of his league. And so you're marveling at where he is, but also at what he's going through. So it's a combination of things. So I think that's why I enjoy it anyway.
What do you enjoy about writing them?
Well, my Ava Lee is chasing bad debts, and so they take her in strange places because that's where people go with money they've stolen. People don't hang around downtown Calgary with their stolen millions. They try to hide it somewhere. So she's always chasing it down. And I only write about places I have been to, okay? And like in Norman Lewis, I'm trying to impart the flavor of a place rather than write a travelogue. I'm trying to give it a sense of a place. And I enjoy it because I have been to a lot of places. I've been to more than 60 countries over the years, and I was always a curious traveler. So I was always reading about where I was and trying to understand where I was, and I try to impart some of that.
It's like revisiting the place almost, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. That's why I like to write about where I write. Just like going back home. Gary.
Well, I'm fascinated by other cultures, other languages, other cuisines, and quite frankly, if it's sort of like these tools that will generate a random name for your character if you can't think of a good one yourself. I literally took a map and stuck a pin in it randomly, and that's how my characters ended up in Georgia. Why Georgia? Because I've never been there, and I really knew nothing about it other than it had the same name as a U.S. state. So in researching for the story, I learned all sorts of amazing things. They've been growing grapes for wine there for the last 8,000 years. Everything contains walnuts. And it's just a really fun ride to learn about some place that I've never considered before. And as to why readers like that, I'm hoping it's for the same reason that I do. Oh, they're in an interesting place. Well, let's see what happens there.
Very good. Thanks, Gary. Sharon?
I love sensory details. I love colors and smells and sounds and temperature and weather. And I really love exploring and thinking about what it might be like in another place. And then if I can, I'm pretty sure, and I've heard other people say this, sight is the most overused detail that writers use. And we can unfortunately get the sight details even better now with the internet. You know, we can watch YouTube, we can look at still photos, we can do all kinds of things. But we still can't get the sounds and the colors and the smells and all of those other sensory details. And that's one of the reasons that if for a longer work, particularly a book, I really feel like I have to have lived in a place in order to write it. I can visit for a short time, or I can do research and maybe use it in a short story and so on. But I really like to write about places that I've been, because I think you can get very small details that make the work. I think readers like to read it because we like to be taken out of our everyday We want something different. And reading a book about it is an awful lot easier than getting your passport renewed, packing, going through customs, so on and so forth. And so I think it's always been a quick and easy way to do armchair travel, and people have really liked that for a long time.
Thanks, Sharon.
Well, I was a child living on a NATO base during the Cold War, which is where my East German character first came from. And I was keenly aware from a very early age about cultural differences and political differences and food and Christmas songs. And I think by the time I was 10, I'd lived in 11 different places. But I think probably my time in Europe was the biggest one for me. We traveled extensively. We were sampling the local food, learning different languages. We felt, honestly, really shut out of a lot of cultures when we didn't speak any of the language. So most of my friends picked up a smattering of several languages just on weekend trips around Europe. And I think what it also left me with was a real strong curiosity about how people's culture shapes how they think and interact. Italy, with its long history of, well, might as well call it the mafia, right? Everybody knows what that means. Sicilian families feuding and controlling a lot of political systems, the way that it's embedded there. Murder is seen differently. Killing someone has a lot of rationales that are accepted in other parts of the world that are not acceptable in Canada, even if they're still technically illegal, and so on. So for me, I think the challenge of writing crimes in other places is to put myself into that culture and understand what makes a crime in that society, what makes the people, the victim in that society. Why do some people lie to the police in this society more than in others? All of those factors come from education, upbringing, environment, socialization going back generations, hundreds, even thousands of years. The way I learn a lot is through fiction, and the way that I try to open new ideas for readers is through fiction. First, I have to try and write an entertaining story, and second, I want it to impart, not by preaching or teaching, but by the layers of cultural details that I can put in, to impart some understanding of that culture's similarities and differences to mine or my readers. And so, yeah, because I was an Air Force brat, I've been to pretty much all the places that I wrote about and more. I've got a long backlist of places I could write about, and I would love to go back to most of them. If I could go back anywhere, it would be to Cornwall. I love Bodmin Moor. I've loved it since I first read about it. And I put some of the Maddie Hatter book in Cornwall because I have oodles of pictures, and the feel and the sense of the air and the smell of the rain and the long slopes down to the sea, they're all there in my head, and I love writing about them, so I'll probably use it again.
Thank you. Both of the ladies mentioned smell, and smell is actually the strongest trigger for memories, is smell. Okay, we're going to have one more question we'll give them a chance to address, and then we'll open the questions to the floor. So the last question we're going to have a look at here is, what's the worst mistake that an author can make in writing about far-off places? And what's the worst mistake you've made, and did you catch it in the edits? Who would like to start? Speaker's choice. Go ahead, Sharon.
Okay, step number one, I gotta have a map. And if I don't have a map, I have to draw a map. If it's an imaginary country, then the first thing I have to do is I have to draw a map. The second thing that I really think about doing is what I call exploration, extrapolation, and experimentation. So for exploration, I try to go to primary sources if I possibly can. If I'm going to write a story that's set in Africa, I'm going to go to the library and get an African cookbook and look what some of the ingredients are. And then I'm going to go down to the African grocery store on McLeod Trail, and I'm going to buy those ingredients, and I'm going to go home and just make some stuff and see what it feels like and tastes like and smells like and so on. Then extrapolation is what can we use that we've already experienced to kind of imagine what something would be like. So here I am, I'm sitting in North Carolina, grew up in the South, obviously from my accent, and I do not have an up-close and personal acquaintance with snow at this point, or below zero temperatures. But I did spend a winter in Kansas. And it snowed, and there was wind that came in off the prairie, and I got all of my other people in the apartment who were all from places from Wisconsin and northern Minnesota and so on to go out and help me build my first snowman, and they didn't really see this as the life-changing experience that I thought it was. But I had that to draw on, so I'm writing northern Alberta, first snowfall in the winter, and I can use what I knew from Kansas to write some of those details. The third one is experimentation. If I've got to have my character walk 6 miles on a really hot day, then I really owe it to my reader to go out and walk 6 miles on a really hot day, which is why my characters really don't tend to do really odd and unusual things, because I don't really want to go and do a lot about that. I think also, if you are writing a particular time frame and you're saying to your reader, you know, this takes place in XYZ on the month of June in such and such a year, then I go back and I try and find out what was happening in that place during that month. Because if I was going to write a story in Edmonton, for example, and it included Friday, July the 31st, 1987, what do I need to know about Edmonton for that date? There was a tornado. It was Black Friday, and I happened to be living in Edmonton at that time, and I remember that day. But if I don't know that, and I write about some place, and there's a reader, they're going to pick it up. You can bet 100% that one of your readers is going to say, "You didn't mention the tornado." So I feel that as an author, what I at least owe the reader is to put in my introductions or acknowledgments or whatever, something like, if you were in Edmonton on such and such a date, you will know that that was called Black Friday. My story takes place in the morning. The tornado didn't strike until the afternoon. That's why it's not in the story.
Okay. Thank you.
You're as crazy as I am.
Known you for a long time, Gary.
Yeah. We won't say how long in public. The lack of attention to detail, I think, is the cardinal sin of anybody who writes stuff where it can be checked. If you have your own planet or a completely fantasy setting, then you can do pretty much whatever you want as long as you're consistent. As another famous writer has often said, if it takes 3 days hard riding to get from A to B, it had better not take an afternoon's gentle saunter to get from B to A. Trying to think of the worst thing that I did. Actually, probably the worst thing that I almost committed was a historical oopsie. Part of one of my books takes place in the 1600s, just before the 30 Years' War. And there was a failed rebellion in Poland at that time, which I didn't take into account when I first wrote that section of the book. However, it turned out that Sigismund, who was the king at the time, was in a completely different place because of the rebellion that was taking place, and of course the route that people would have taken to get from A to B was also changed by the rebellion taking place. This actually made the book better, because otherwise it was just a boring go see Sigismund, drop the thing off, leave, and as a result it made the story a lot richer, but I almost missed those historical details, and people in Europe tend to be a lot more savvy about their own history than we do in North America. If you asked your average North American to name 5 famous military engagements in North America, they'd be fairly hard-pressed to do it. Whereas anybody living in Europe will say, oh yes, well there have been 3 battles in the field just down there, and you know, my great-great-great-grandfather was in one of them, and so you know that somebody is going to read your book and go, no, that's wrong, and throw the book across the room, and then you're done.
And they'll never buy another.
They'll never buy another.
That's
because if you
right.
get that important to them detail wrong,
That's correct.
what else have you done wrong?
Yes, I picked up a book once and started to read it, and it said the identical twins, Susan and Sean.
Maybe one of them is trans.
Since I have identical twins, I knew that wasn't likely. Thanks, Gary. Ian?
I've never caught James Lee Burke out on a New Iberia mistake yet. It irritates me completely.
I not only write about real places geographically, I write about real restaurants, real hotels, real locales everywhere. And I'm quite careful in terms of the approach I take. One time, it was a plot necessity. I was writing about a hotel in London, and I had my character attacked out of an alleyway alongside the hotel. My English publisher sent someone to the hotel and saw there was no lane, and emailed me and said, you either take that out or you change the name of the hotel. So being lazy, I changed the name of the hotel.
And did they check that one too?
No, because I made it fictional.
Yes.
Just to get away from it all. But I've rarely actually been corrected. That was one of the few times. A reader at one time corrected me on the street in Hong Kong, which I had going right, and you can't go right on it. So they caught that. But I just finished reading John le Carré's memoir. Actually, I got an advanced reading copy, so it's not out yet. But he writes about when the Honorable Schoolboy was about to be published. He was in Hong Kong, and he was crossing from Kowloon to the island, and the harbor tunnel had just opened. And in his book, or the harbor tunnel was there, and in his book, he had neglected to realize the harbor tunnel had opened. And he called the publisher from Hong Kong, and the book was already at the printers being published. And he made them stop the press run, and they destroyed over 60,000 books so he could make the correction, which I think is a wonderful testament to how detailed John le Carré was.
Yes, we should all follow in his footsteps there. Okay, Jane, what's your biggest goof here?
Well, first of all, I would like to have the pull to be able to kill a 60,000 book print run, honestly. So, well, as a reader, what bugs me, and again, this comes from my awareness of different cultures, is when I pick up a book supposedly about for example, a young woman in Switzerland in 1878 who has the identical characteristics and speech patterns of a modern 20-something, 21st century woman of the same age. Those kind of things really bug me. And a lot of them are fairly easy to check. If you check girls' education in Switzerland on Google, you get way more than you really need to know that, no, she's not going to be taking the train by herself, and so on and so forth. For the biggest mistake I ever made was a real hurricane. Seriously, it was a hurricane. I had a beautiful sailboat, and I'm quite attracted to very large sailboats. Moving between one Caribbean island and another with its false hull stuffed with drugs. And on the way, it ran into a hurricane and was delayed long enough for the detective on shore to figure out who had the drugs and arrange to stop the boat at the next island and arrest everybody. Then I looked at, and I plead this was before the days of the internet when you could check the weather. Then I looked up exactly when hurricanes happen, and I was 2 months outside the window. There had never in recorded history been a hurricane at the time of year I needed the hurricane. Fortunately, yes, I did actually change the plot to reflect that the weather was calm, clear, and thought up another obstacle. But it was a lesson to me very early on. Always check the weather.
Yes, and tides and all of the other things that go with it. Well, those are interesting to see. You see, those of us who are newer writers, we have to learn from this, but we also, if we do make a goof, know that we're in good company. Because they are made, just as long as you catch it in the edits. As you say, we don't have the pull to stop a 60,000.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Now, what would you folks like to know? Oh, sorry, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to go to the other extreme, the smallest detail that stopped me for several weeks. Air Canada, when it goes to Heathrow Airport, goes to Terminal 2. This has always happened. This will always happen, except when they were redoing Terminal 2. And since my story took place during that period of time, I thought, well, obviously there must be, some record of where Air Canada planes went when Terminal 2 was closed. I couldn't find it anywhere. I couldn't find it from Air Canada. I couldn't find, it's just like, well, why do you want to know that? That's ancient history. Why would anybody care? I ended up asking pilots that I knew, who knew commercial pilots who worked for Air Canada, and finally discovered that they were rerouted to Terminal 1. This took me about 3 weeks of research just to find the stupid air terminal that Air Canada used in Heathrow during one small period of time. Because somebody's going to know.
Someone will catch it,
Yeah.
for sure.
See, I would have just skipped out and said, landed at Heathrow.